In the quiet town of Ashridge, Colorado, nestled between dusty hills and endless fields, lived a man nobody truly understood. Locals called him Jack Mercer, a quiet, rugged mechanic with scars on his hands and shadows in his eyes. His garage on the edge of town was ordinary. His locked-down workshop behind it? That was the stuff of rumors. Some said he was building weapons. Others whispered about black market surgeries. But no one had ever stepped inside, not even the sheriff. For 3 years, Jack kept his secrets buried, until a teenage boy named Ethan Carter knocked on his door, desperate to learn about engines, and unknowingly opened the door to something far bigger than himself. What started as a simple act of curiosity would unravel a mystery tied to classified military programs, secret medical breakthroughs, and a man's mission to save those the system had abandoned. When helicopters suddenly roar across the morning sky and federal agents descend on Ashridge, the entire town will realize Jack Mercer isn't who they thought he was. And the truth? It's not just shocking, it's heroic. This is a story of trust, redemption, and a workshop that changed lives. Ashridge, Colorado, present day. Ashridge was the kind of town people passed through, not moved to. A single gas station, a diner that hadn't changed its menu in 20 years, and a main street where nothing exciting ever happened, except maybe the 4th of July parade. Everyone knew everyone, and the rhythm of daily life was slow, predictable, and safe. That's exactly why Jack Mercer had chosen it. Jack moved into town 3 years ago. He bought an old auto garage at the edge of Ashridge, fixed it up with his own hands, and opened Mercer Auto and Diesel. He never advertised. Didn't need to. His work spoke for itself. Engines that sputtered came back to life. Trucks that everyone else had given up on roared back onto the road like new. But Jack didn't speak much. A nod here, a brief thanks there. He never came to town events. Never visited the diner. Never joined Sunday services or shopped at the local grocery store. He kept to himself, and for most people in Ashridge, that was enough. Until they noticed the workshop. Out behind Jack's main garage sat a separate building. Metal siding, steel-reinforced doors, no windows, no signage. No one ever saw Jack bring customers back there. No one was ever invited in. Not even the sheriff. The workshop had an industrial lock and surveillance cameras, and a small, unlit path leading from his house to the door. Naturally, the mystery grew. At first, it was just passing curiosity. A few of the older folks figured he was just a private man. Veteran, probably, said Ned Johnson from the hardware store. Saw things he doesn't want to talk about. Let the man be. But others weren't so charitable. I bet he's cooking meth, Debbie from the diner whispered one morning over pancakes. Or worse. Maybe he's got bodies in freezers back there. Her friend, Susan, leaned in and nodded solemnly. I heard he was dishonorably discharged from the military. Dishonorable means dangerous. The gossip spread like wildfire, each telling more dramatic than the last. Strange noises at night, unmarked vans parked outside, the faint glow of lights under the workshop door after midnight. One kid swore he heard a scream once. Another claimed he saw a man limping out the back, only to vanish into the woods. None of it was ever confirmed. But the unknown breeds fear, and soon even the sheriff, Wade Connors, started watching Jack more closely. He drove by a little more often. Slowed down every time he passed the garage. Once, he even walked up and knocked on the workshop door, just to check in. Jack didn't answer. Still, no one could prove anything. And that's what made it worse. He's hiding something, said Susan one evening at church potluck. A man doesn't lock up part of his life unless he's ashamed of it. But the truth was, Jack Mercer wasn't ashamed. He was protecting something. Something far more important than they could ever imagine. Beneath the cold metal exterior of that workshop was a secret operation. A lifeline for those abandoned by the system. A place where broken bodies and fractured minds were given a second chance, quietly, without red tape, without fanfare. But Ashridge didn't know that yet. To them, he was just a loner. A ghost of a man with oil-stained hands, a 1,000-yard stare, and a dangerous silence. And that silence was about to be shattered. Because when one curious teenager stepped too close, and a helicopter shadow passed overhead, Ashridge would discover that Jack Mercer's workshop wasn't just off-limits. It was the most important place in town. The first time Ethan Carter showed up at Mercer Auto, Jack barely noticed him. Just another kid on a bike, loitering near the chain-link fence like he was waiting for something. Or maybe someone. Jack was underneath a lifted F-250, wrench in hand, when he heard the tentative voice. Excuse me, Mr. Mercer? I'm Ethan. I was wondering if I could maybe watch you work. The mechanic slid out from under the truck, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. He eyed the teenager, skinny, freckled, with a mop of dark blonde hair and a determined look that didn't match his age. Why? Jack asked, not unkindly but directly. Ethan hesitated. I like engines. My dad used to fix up old motorcycles before he left. Jack didn't say anything. Just looked at the boy for a moment longer, then went back under the truck. Ethan stayed. And the next day, he came back. And the day after that. He didn't talk much, just watched, asked questions when it felt right, swept up without being asked. Slowly, Jack began to let him do small things, handing over tools, checking oil levels, replacing air filters. The boy listened. Carefully. Closely. He absorbed everything like a sponge. Jack liked that. Ashridge had its share of teenagers, most of them buried in their phones, bored out of their minds. But this kid? He had focus. Hunger. Not just to learn, but to be seen. To matter. One day, Jack tossed him a set of gloves. Go ahead. Pull the spark plugs from that Civic. Ethan blinked, then grinned. Really? Jack just nodded and returned to his task. It became a routine. Ethan would show up after school and stay until dusk. He never asked about the workshop out back. Not once. Not until curiosity finally got the better of him. Mr. Mercer, Ethan said one Thursday evening, as they closed up shop. That building back there. Is it, like a project or something? Jack froze. Just a moment. Then, private space. Ethan nodded quickly. Sorry. I didn't mean to pry. Jack studied him, the way his shoulders tightened, how fast he backpedaled. The kid wasn't fishing for gossip, he was genuinely curious. Maybe even concerned. Some doors, Jack said finally, stay closed for good reasons. Ethan didn't push again. But he thought about it every time he saw the faint light behind the curtains. Every time he heard something that didn't sound like an engine. Once, he thought he saw someone go inside, on crutches. But when he blinked, they were gone. At home, Ethan's mom, Rachel Carter, was worried. You're spending a lot of time with that mechanic, she said, pouring boxed macaroni into boiling water. People say he's strange. He's not, Ethan snapped. He's just private. And he's teaching me more than school ever has. Rachel sighed. It had been a hard year. After the divorce, Ethan had become withdrawn, angry, adrift. But now, he came home with grease on his hands and stories in his eyes. Still, that workshop worried her. Promise me you'll stay out of that back building, she said. I already do, Ethan muttered. But maybe that's where he helps people. Rachel frowned. Helps how? Ethan didn't answer. He wasn't sure. One afternoon, as they were changing brake pads on a Jeep Cherokee, Jack handed Ethan a wrench and said, You ever wonder why people keep things to themselves? Ethan paused. Yeah. I think, maybe it's because they're scared people won't understand. Jack looked at him for a long second, then returned to tightening the caliper bolt. You're smarter than you look, he said with a faint smirk. Ethan smiled back. I get that a lot. That night, Ethan sat on his bed, hands still stained with grease, staring at the ceiling. His dad had been a Marine. Got back from overseas with a bad leg and a worse temper. The VA gave him painkillers and pamphlets, but nothing that really helped. Eventually, he walked out. Just disappeared. Ethan never stopped wondering if there was someone, somewhere, who could have fixed what was broken. Someone like Jack Mercer. Maybe that's what was behind the door. Not something dangerous. Something powerful. But curiosity, once sparked, is hard to contain. And Ethan was about to cross a line no one in Ashridge had dared to approach. A line that would pull him, and the entire town, into a secret hidden in plain sight. And nothing would ever be the same again. The rumors about Jack Mercer had always been background noise in Ashridge. Whispers over coffee at the diner. Sideways glances at the hardware store. But now, those murmurs were starting to rise in pitch. Because something had changed. More than one person had noticed out-of-state vehicles parked near Mercer's garage late at night. SUVs with tinted windows. Drivers who didn't speak much and didn't stay long. More than one neighbor had sworn they heard strange machinery humming from the back workshop, sounds that didn't belong in any normal garage. And when Deputy Hal Granger spotted one of those vehicles pulling away at 3 a.m., he quietly logged the plate number. It didn't come back registered. That's when he told Sheriff Wade Connors. The sheriff rubbed his temples and sighed. He'd known Jack was different. A man with military precision in everything from the way he spoke to how he coiled extension cords. But different didn't mean dangerous, did it? Still, the law was the law. And the more the town speculated, the more pressure Connors felt to act. Meanwhile, in a windowless office across town, Dr. Leonard Mathers was fuming. He sat behind his desk at Ashridge Community Health, flipping through 2 empty patient files. Both veterans. Both regulars. Both had canceled their appointments without explanation. But Dr. Mathers had overheard enough murmurs to connect the dots. They were going to him. To Jack Mercer. The idea made his skin crawl. Leonard had spent 2 decades earning his medical credentials, attending conferences, building trust in the community. And now, some backwoods mechanic with no license, no training, and no right, was taking his patients? It was more than offensive. It was dangerous. He reached for the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. This is Dr. Leonard Mathers. I need to report a case of unauthorized medical practice. The individual's name is Jack Mercer. And just like that, a fuse was lit. Back at the garage, Ethan was starting to feel the shift, too. He showed up for his usual evening with Jack, but the mechanic looked different. His eyes scanned the street more often. His words were fewer, clipped. He didn't joke or explain as much as usual. Ethan didn't press, until Jack suddenly pulled the rolling door closed mid-job, something he'd never done before. Is everything okay? Ethan asked quietly. Jack didn't answer at first. Then, some people are asking questions they shouldn't. About the workshop? Jack's jaw tightened. About me. About what I do. Or what they think I do. Ethan hesitated. Are you in trouble? Jack turned to look at him, his expression unreadable. Trouble finds you when people fear what they don't understand. Later that night, Sheriff Connors stood across from Mercer's locked workshop. He hadn't come with a warrant, just a flashlight and a worn badge that usually got him where he needed to go. But tonight, he hesitated. He wasn't just a lawman. He was a veteran himself. He knew the look in Jack's eyes, had seen it in mirrors after bad deployments. The weight of carrying more than one person should. And the guilt that came from surviving when others didn't. But that didn't give Jack the right to operate outside the law. He knocked once, firm and loud. Jack opened the main house door, no surprise on his face. Evening, Sheriff. Evening, Jack. Long silence. You've been busy lately, Connors said, eyeing the dark building behind the garage. I run a business. I've seen some of your clients. Out-of-towners. Veterans? Jack didn't respond. You treating them? Jack met his gaze. I fix what I can. That sounds a lot like a confession. That sounds like the truth. Connor sighed. You know I have to look into it. I know. You hiding anything dangerous back there? Jack's voice went quiet. Only pain. And a few second chances. The next morning, an unmarked envelope arrived at the Ashridge County Courthouse addressed to Connors. Inside were photos. Blurry but clear enough, military medical equipment, a patient being moved on a gurney, Jack in surgical gloves. They weren't from town. They were from someone else watching. The message was clear, someone beyond Ashridge was paying attention now. And whatever Jack was doing, it had become bigger than the town, bigger than any sheriff. At the same moment, in the safety of his bedroom, Ethan couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the sheriff's visit, Jack's silence, the tension in the air. He had questions. So many questions. And he was about to make a choice. One that would tip the scales, shatter the quiet, and place Jack Mercer, and himself, on a collision course with forces neither fully understood. It started with a sound. A low, rhythmic thumping, like thunder rolling over the mountains, but steady, mechanical, unmistakable. At 7:41 a.m., the town of Ashridge woke to helicopter rotors slicing the sky. 3 Black Hawks soared over the rooftops in perfect formation, casting shadows over the sleepy town. The few early risers stopped in their tracks. Coffee cups trembled on porches. Children pointed. Adults froze. They weren't search and rescue choppers. They were federal aircraft. And they were heading straight toward Mercer Auto. Inside the garage, Jack Mercer had already been up for hours. He was running protocols, backups, encryption, final logs. He had sensed it coming. Maybe it was the visit from Connors. Maybe it was the silence from his contacts. Or maybe, after years of operating in the shadows, his time had simply run out. He had just locked a reinforced cabinet containing patient records when his phone buzzed. Sheriff Connors. Jack answered with a single word. It's happening? They're coming, Jack. Feds. They didn't say your name, but I'm not stupid. They asked for my cooperation, told me to stay away from the east side of town. Jack looked out the window. The sky was already vibrating. How long? Minutes. Maybe less. I'm sorry. I know. Then Jack hung up. No panic. No pacing. Just a long breath. He slipped on his old field jacket, opened a drawer, and removed a secure data drive. He placed it into a fireproof safe built into the floor. Then he stepped outside, just as the first black SUV came to a halt in front of his property, tires crunching the gravel like gunfire. Across town, Ethan Carter had barely taken a bite of his cereal when the windows started rattling. His mom rushed to the porch. What in the world? Ethan didn't wait. He knew. He grabbed his backpack and ran out the door before Rachel could stop him, legs pumping as fast as his thoughts. He pedaled furiously down Maple Street, heart in his throat. By the time he reached the edge of Mercer Auto, dozens of agents were swarming the grounds, black vests, weapons drawn, helmets glinting under morning light. He tried to push through the growing crowd of townsfolk, but Sheriff Connors intercepted him. Whoa, kid. You can't be here. But I have to talk to them. Jack hasn't done anything wrong. That's for them to decide now. Jack stood on the porch of his home as the lead agent, a man in a crisp navy suit, approached. Michael Jack Mercer? The agent asked. Just Jack. I'm Agent Rowe, FBI. We have a federal warrant to search these premises for evidence of unauthorized medical practice and possession of restricted military technology. Jack's voice was steady. I fix engines. Then you won't mind if we take a look. Rowe gestured, and 2 agents moved toward the workshop. They approached the door with caution, far more than necessary, as if they expected booby traps or biohazards. Secure the building. Full containment protocol. From the crowd, Ethan watched in disbelief. He wasn't the only one. A few townsfolk whispered. Others looked ashamed. The rumors had caught fire, and now the flames were real. But then, another sound. Not the tight whir of helicopters, but something deeper. More powerful. 3 CH-47 Chinooks emerged from the horizon, massive twin-rotor transports that shook the air like war drums. They circled once, then began to descend into a clearing adjacent to Jack's property. The wind from their descent whipped up dust and leaves, scattering papers and hats and certainty. And then they landed. From the first Chinook, a tall man stepped out. His uniform bore 4 stars. His posture was pure command. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Is that a general?" It was Major General Curtis Lane, U.S. Special Operations Command. He didn't wait for permission. He strode past the FBI perimeter with absolute purpose. "I need to speak with your agent in charge." Immediately. Minutes later, Jack, Agent Rowe, and General Lane disappeared into Jack's house. The crowd held its breath. Tension gripped Ashridge like a vice. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Finally, the door opened. Agent Rowe emerged, followed by General Lane, and then Jack. He wasn't in cuffs. He wasn't under arrest. He was smiling. General Lane stepped forward. "There appears to have been a significant misunderstanding regarding Mr. Mercer's activities." Gasps. Murmurs. Phones recording. "Mr. Mercer is a..." Agent Rowe's mouth opened. "That can't be. He has no active license." "The license is covered by a Department of Defense waiver," the general interrupted. "Mr. Mercer's facility is part of a black budget initiative to test advanced rehabilitation for veterans with traumatic injuries." Ethan turned to his mother. "See? I told you. He's not dangerous, he's helping people." General Lane wasn't finished. "Dozens of lives have been restored because of this man's work. He has succeeded where conventional systems failed." Behind the general, veterans emerged from the second and third helicopters, men and women in wheelchairs, with prosthetic limbs, and steady, proud eyes. They walked up to Jack. They hugged him. They saluted him. And suddenly, the townspeople who had once whispered about the mysterious mechanic saw him for who he really was. Not a recluse. Not a criminal. But a quiet warrior, still fighting, in his own way. For years, the people of Ashridge had made their own assumptions about Jack Mercer. They thought they understood him, or at least, they were comfortable not understanding him. He was the mystery at the edge of town, the man with the locked door, the scarred face, and the silent presence. But standing there, watching the most powerful figure in the U.S. military embrace the man they had once feared, everything changed. One by one, the veterans who had arrived on the Chinook stepped forward. Men who had been wheelchair-bound and hopeless. Women who had lost limbs, mobility, and faith in the system. Each of them carried not just wounds, but stories of pain, of abandonment by the institutions that were supposed to help them. And each of them pointed to Jack Mercer as the reason they had found their way back. Sheriff Connor stepped up quietly beside the general. "Why didn't you tell me, Jack?" Jack's voice was low. "I wasn't allowed to. The program's classified. And besides, if I had, would you have believed me?" Connors didn't answer. But the guilt in his eyes said everything. At the front of the crowd, Ethan Carter stood beside his mother. For once, he wasn't the awkward, curious kid trying to prove himself. He was just proud. The man who had taught him about spark plugs and brake lines had also been saving lives behind locked doors. And Ethan had seen it before anyone else did. He turned to his mom. "Do you think he could have helped Dad?" Rachel didn't answer at first. Her eyes were fixed on Jack, who was now speaking softly with a new arrival, a Marine who looked barely older than Ethan and walked with a robotic leg. Jack placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. The young man nodded, emotion brimming just beneath the surface. Rachel whispered, "I think he already is." Later that day, as the helicopters prepared to depart, General Lane made an announcement that stunned even the FBI agents still recovering from the humiliation of being wrong. Effective immediately, Jack Mercer's facility will receive expanded federal support. This site will become a regional center for veteran rehabilitation, integrating cutting-edge technology with the human compassion that Mr. Mercer exemplifies. A few townspeople clapped awkwardly at first. Then more joined. Then it became a standing ovation. The man who had once been the subject of hushed suspicion was now the reason Ashridge was being talked about nationwide. But Jack didn't soak in the applause. He wasn't that kind of man. He simply turned to his crew, his quiet network of specialists, veterans, and volunteers, and nodded. Then he looked toward Ethan, gave a faint smile, and disappeared into the workshop as silently as ever. That evening, the town began to shift. Dr. Mathers, the man who had filed the complaint, walked across Jack's gravel driveway just before sundown. He had a folder in hand, and a look on his face like someone who had just swallowed something bitter. "I misjudged you," he said simply. Jack raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Mathers hesitated, then added, "Maybe you could use a doctor on staff." Jack gave a long pause, then opened the door wider. "Come in." Because mercy, like medicine, begins with listening. As for Ethan, his life changed in ways he couldn't have predicted. He was no longer just the kid who hung around the garage. He became an apprentice, then an assistant. Jack gave him more responsibility. Taught him not just mechanics, but ethics, too. The weight of helping others. The importance of silence. And the courage it takes to hold on to hope when everyone else has given up. Weeks later, while adjusting a prosthetic on a new patient, Ethan asked Jack, "Why Ashridge? Why this town?" Jack didn't even look up. He just said, "Small towns protect their own." And maybe that was the lesson after all. That sometimes the people we fear are the ones quietly saving the world. That heroism doesn't always look like a cape or a headline, it can look like a man in coveralls, oil on his hands, and kindness in his heart. That even in the most unassuming places, beneath locked doors and whispered rumors, grace is working in silence. And when truth finally steps into the light, the whole town changes with it. It was a week after the helicopters left when the storm rolled in. The skies over Ashridge turned slate gray, and thunder echoed through the valleys. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, soaking the streets and pattering against windows like a second heartbeat. But in one small home at the edge of town, hearts beat a little faster, not in fear, but in anticipation. A military vehicle pulled up slowly to the Carter home. The engine idled for a moment, then the back door opened. David Carter stepped out. He looked thinner, older than Ethan remembered. His hair was grayer. His posture stiff, but he stood on his own. No cane. No hesitation. And his eyes, they were clear. Focused. Present. Ethan was out the door before Rachel could speak. "Dad." David dropped his bag and opened his arms just in time to catch his son in a tight, shaking embrace. Rachel followed, her hand to her mouth, tears already falling. No one said a word. They didn't need to. The storm didn't stop. But for the first time in years, the Carters felt whole again, even as the rain poured down around them. Not far away, Jack Mercer sat in his truck, parked under a tree. He didn't knock. Didn't interrupt. He just watched, quietly, as the reunion unfolded. Then, with the same steady hands that had saved so many lives, he turned the key and drove off into the rain, leaving behind no thanks, no applause, just impact. Some reunions deserved privacy. Some healers worked best in silence. In the months that followed, Ashridge changed. The once mysterious workshop became a certified rehabilitation center for veterans. New signs were put up. Fences were taken down. Locals who once whispered now volunteered. Even Dr. Mathers, who had once tried to shut it all down, found redemption of his own, working alongside Jack, humbled by what he had witnessed. "Your methods challenge everything I was taught," he told Jack once. Jack had just nodded. Sometimes, what we're taught isn't enough. Ethan kept coming back. He helped calibrate new devices, wrote down patient notes, and learned things that no textbook ever taught. More than anything, he learned that healing wasn't always clinical. Sometimes it was mechanical. Sometimes emotional. And sometimes, it was just showing up. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Ethan walked into the garage and found Jack staring at an old photograph, his former unit. All gone now, except him. "You still miss them?" Ethan asked gently. Jack nodded. "Every day. But, you're helping people now. Like they would have wanted, right?" Jack looked at him, eyes full of memories and meaning. Exactly like they would have wanted. Because in a world full of noise, it's often the quiet ones, those who carry their pain in silence, who end up changing everything. Jack Mercer never wanted fame. He never asked for praise. He only wanted to help those the world had forgotten. And in doing so, he reminded an entire town that sometimes, the greatest heroes aren't the loudest. They're the ones who fix what others left broken. Some stories stay with us long after the screen fades to black. Not because they're loud, but because they're true. Because they remind us that kindness doesn't always wear a uniform. That healing doesn't only happen in hospitals. That sometimes, the quietest hands do the loudest work. If this story touched you, if Jack Mercer's journey stirred something in your heart, we invite you to take a moment. Not just to reflect, but to act. There are veterans in every town, men and women who came home with wounds no one can see. People like David Carter. People like Jack's former teammates. And maybe, people like someone you know. They don't always ask for help. But they need it. They need understanding. They need second chances. They need us. So here's what you can do. Speech balloon, leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Did this story remind you of someone in your life? Have you or your family walked a similar path? Your words may help others feel less alone. Loudspeaker, share this video with someone who needs hope. A veteran, a caregiver, a mother holding on to a thread of belief that things can still get better. You never know whose life you might change with a single click. They'll subscribe to HAI Stories, where we shine a light on everyday heroes, people who remind us that integrity, resilience, and quiet courage still exist in this world. Lightbulb, support local veterans in your community. Whether it's through a donation, a volunteer hour, or simply listening, you can be the bridge someone else is praying for. And finally, if you're carrying your own story, of loss, of healing, of helping others rebuild, we see you. You matter. Your story matters. Let's make space for more stories like Jack Mercer's. Not just here on YouTube, but in real life, where they're needed most. Because in the end, the strongest communities are built not on concrete or laws, but on compassion. Thank you for being part of ours. We'll see you in the next story. Stay kind. Stay human. The HAI Stories team.